Hi, my name's Russ. I'm a Soulsborne content creator with an emphasis on PvP. Backstabs are one of the most satisfying and stylish ways to get a kill, throwing your opponent into a sick animation, blood splattering all over the screen, crowd goes wild, your father finally accepts you, comes running back to you and asks you to take him back. But you're so full of self-confidence after landing that insane backstab that was totally intentional, by the way. You don't need them anymore. And you're on that grind set mindset, ready to level up your dating profile on Tinder with the sexy pickup line, "Do you play Dark Souls? 'Cause I'd grab that ass." And then your DMs suddenly get filled with messages telling you how hot and cool you are. Focus up. Here's the deal. This game is rough, with hyper armor warfare, L2 spamming, bloodhound, quickhound, steps, slashing, spin, fucking brain dead nonsense, but with all that garbage, there's one thing that makes it all worth it. Backstab fishing. Reading your opponent like a book and spending the whole match setting up one opportunity to get a backstab on them and landing it. My goal with this video is to get you more bitches, backstabs, using proven concepts and useful information. I'm going to try and break this down in a way that makes sense and is easy to understand, and go over some of the common mistakes that people tend to make when trying to fish for a backstab and ways that you can improve your success. This video is going to cover a number of different topics: the grab, frame data, the 4 primary techniques, common mistakes, and a brief PSA/Malding segment. At the end of the video will be a showcase where I'll be demonstrating the concepts covered in the video. Be sure to like and subscribe, and let me know in the comments if you found the information helpful at all, or if you're just more confused than ever. Elden Ring works on a peer-to-peer connection between players, and in order to make sense, the code has to be broken down into segments before it can be translated to in-game actions. A backstab is broken down first to determine whether or not the attacking player cues a backstab attempt, which we call a grab, then second to determine whether or not that backstab was successful. In order for the grab to occur, the attacking player has to meet 2 checks. Players have something called a grab box, which looks something like a rectangle behind their body. Within this grab box, if another player goes for an attack, they have the potential to cue a backstab. At the edges of this grab box is what's known as a false grab box. A false grab box is a space where the player is still in range to be locked into a backstab cue, but it will never be successful. The second check that needs to be met is a direction check, requiring that the attacking player is facing the same direction that the opponent is facing within 15 degrees. Now, once the grab initiates, another check has to take place to determine whether or not the backstab was successful. These checks are 2-sided confirmation and need to be met by the person being backstabbed in order for your backstab to be successful. First, the opponent has to stay within the grab box determined by your player. If they walk outside of that range before the grab animation is completed on their screen, then they'll escape the grab. The second check is another angle check. For this one, the opponent has to rotate at least 135 degrees in the opposite direction of where they were originally facing in order to escape the grab. This does not mean the same thing as facing you within 135 degrees. In fact, if you stand off to their side when you cue a backstab, and they rotate to face you directly, then it's likely that they'll still get sucked into a backstab if they didn't rotate that full 135 degrees. So, you go for the initial cue, you meet the distance check by being within the grab box, you meet the initial angle check by facing the same angle as the opponent, the cue occurs, and if the opponent is unable to move outside of the range of the grab box and they're unable to rotate that 135 degrees, then your backstab will be successful. Easy, right? Well, not really. Obviously, latency is always going to be a major factor when talking about anything PvP related in Elden Ring. The higher latency that you have to the opponent, the higher likelihood that they'll have either gotten far enough away or rotated far enough to escape the backstab. But the grab itself is one of the fastest attack animations in the game. The grab animation is only 7 frames, and on the 7th frame, if the checks are successful, then the opponent is forced into a backstab. But the time it takes for the opposing player's character to rotate 180 degrees is only about 4 frames. Add that on top of whatever amount of latency that you have to them, throw in an artificial latency added by Easy Anti-Cheat, boost the strength of the nearby microwave, and you've got yourself like 3 seconds that the opponent has to stand completely and utterly still for the backstab to complete. But now let's get into how you actually land it. There's 4 main techniques that you can use to reliably and consistently get backstabs. First, I'll cover roll backstabs. This is the easiest of the bunch to set up, and depending on your matchup, one of the least reliable. A roll backstab is performed by rolling behind the opponent as they swing, unlocking, and turning your character to face them as you exit your roll to initiate the grab. The timing on this is fairly precise. You have to have fully exited your roll and turn to face the opponent in order to meet the required angle check to get the grab. If you cue the attack before you've satisfied the angle check, then you'll just get a normal rolling attack instead. What makes this so unreliable is the fact that any time that you roll against an opponent, you'll always be what's called frame disadvantage. This is a term to describe that if you go for an attack at the same time as your opponent, then theirs will come out first. It takes a total of 29 frames after executing the roll in order to land a backstab. So, if your opponent is able to swing their weapon again, or roll out within the window of time, then they'll likely escape the grab. So against small weapons, this type of grab is pretty much impossible if the opponent continues to press their attack. But against larger, slower weapons, there's some room for opportunity. But against any setup, you'll have an easier time landing this type of backstab if you go for it after rolling a running or jumping attack. These have a longer recovery than the standing attacks, giving you more room to work with. Strafe backstabs are performed by maneuvering around the opponent's hitbox to avoid their hit entirely and position yourself ready at their back to get a grab while they're still in their attack animation. This is significantly harder to perform, but it has more consistent results. If you can successfully strafe a hit, then you can position yourself behind the opponent's back while they're still in the recovery of their attack, and they'll be unable to rotate or run out of the grab. Strafing works different against each type of weapon, and if you want a thorough breakdown on how to strafe any particular weapon, then I suggest that you watch my video on strafing. But specifically, when strafing for a backstab, it's better to be unlocked with your camera angled down so that you can get a better view of your positioning for the strafe and so that you can manually adjust your angle to get the grab. More often than not, after strafing a hit, you won't have the correct angle in order to initiate a backstab. So, by unlocking, you can free aim your character to match the opponent's. This gets a little weird with some animations that torque the opponent's body, making it difficult to tell exactly where they're facing, a good example of this being Sword Dance. But even harder than a strafe backstab is a pivot. The idea of the pivot backstab is that you run past your opponent as they swing their weapon, then immediately 180 your character in order to get the grab. You have to be sprinting in order to get into position on time, which also puts you at risk of getting stuck in a pivot lock animation. In order to avoid the pivot lock, it's safest to have a shield equipped since you can't get stuck in the pivot animation when you're actively blocking. So you run past while holding block, then let go of the movement stick and the sprint button, so that it resets back to neutral, then immediately pull it back down so that you 180 your character and initiate the grab. If your movement stick does not fully pass through neutral, or if you do not let go of sprint, then you'll cue a running attack instead. The pivot itself can be very difficult, but for a little extra flash for the same effect, you can use a backstep or a reverse backstep to accomplish the same goal. It looks hot, and it's entirely unnecessary, which makes it even hotter in my personal opinion. But out of anything, easily my favorite type of backstab is the roll catch. You can roll catch an opponent out of their iframes with a backstab as long as you have the proper timing and positioning. There's two ways to do this. If the opponent is unlocked and rolling directly away from you, then you can sprint up to keep pace with them and initiate the grab as they exit their roll. The opponent loses iframes as their foot touches the ground, and it's at this moment that you want to initiate the grab. And since rolling slows down the player's travel speed, they'll be unable to escape the grab as long as you have good positioning. This one takes some practice, but with some effort, you can generally get this grab within 1 or 2 rolls if the opponent is panic rolling. The other type of backstab is a forward roll catch. This uses the same concept, but just applies when the opponent is rolling toward you. You position yourself in the same way, being ready to initiate the grab right as their foot touches the ground and pulling them into a backstab. This is probably the most important type of backstab to learn because it's going to be the most common mistake that people make that you can take advantage of in order to get a backstab on them. Anytime that you whiff this backstab is likely due to poor positioning. You have to be positioned as close as possible to where they exit their roll to initiate the grab. Otherwise, if they roll twice, then they'll escape the range of the grab box. Similar to how it works with strafe backstabs, you can use some fancy backsteps to get this type of roll catch as well. But again, it's totally unnecessary, and it looks really fucking cool when you can pull it off. Backstab fishing is challenging, and in Elden Ring, there's a lot of nuance that makes it more difficult than it ever was in past games. One of the most common reasons why you might whiff a backstab is just due to how you read your latency to the opponent. On higher latency, you have to cue a backstab animation very early in advance in order to get a grab, unless your opponent is just standing there and lets it happen. The easiest way to tell if your timing is good or not is to be looking for phantom hits, the blood splatter effect of an opponent after you try and hit them. If the blood splatter comes out much later than when the attack crossed their body, then you're dealing with high latency, and you need to adjust your grab to earlier timing. You can get a grab on almost anything, but of course it's going to be more consistent and reliable against players with less latency. I find that grabs start becoming unreasonable around 160 milliseconds of latency, but if you're just not getting backstab grabs at all and you just keep getting normal R1s, then it's going to be due to your angle check. The angle check is very precise, and if you're locked onto your opponent, then you're likely to be a few degrees off unless you're standing directly behind them. And in most cases, you won't be. So by unlocking from the target and manually setting your angle before going for the grab, you can dramatically improve the consistency of your grabs. Then the last major reason why your backstabs will tend to fail is actually somewhat related to lock-on, and this one is exclusive to Elden Ring. See, the developers at FromSoft got really lazy when it came to coding the frame data for this game, and as a result, there's a bunch of input drops that exist in Elden Ring that don't exist in previous Souls games. There's two input drops that you'll find most common when it comes to backstabs. The first one is associated with letting go of block at the same time that you stop sprinting. If you stop sprinting and drop block, then your attack input will be dropped, causing you to just stand there and look in despair as your fish gets away from you. The other input is similar. It happens when your character causes the natural pivot toward the opponent. If you lock onto your opponent and your character is forced to pivot by any number of degrees, then your attack input will be dropped. I've come to see backstab fishing as something of an art form, a way of manipulating my movement, reading my opponent, and setting up the perfect opportunity to get a grab. I live and die by the fish. It is a suboptimal way to play, and I pass up dozens of opportunities to get a kill when setting up a fish, but for me, that's what I enjoy in the game. But the fact that I have such a strong passion toward this art form of fishing means that I've grown a lot of resentment towards certain practices that I feel remove the skill and challenge out of backstab fishing. Quickstep has a few properties that make it particularly problematic, being a recover cancel with innate iframes, which gives frame advantage on a backstab. But what does frame advantage actually mean here? I'll give a comparison. When you roll behind your opponent, your character has to fully execute the roll and then come out into standing frames before pivoting and then queuing the backstab. This is a 29 frame commitment, meaning that your roll has to be really well timed in order to get the grab. Quickstep, on the other hand, is only a 24 frame commitment and doesn't require a character to transition to standing before pivoting, since you can already be facing the opponent's back by either quickstepping directly to the side or reverse quickstepping. But these are my own feelings about these methods of getting backstabs. I feel it invalidates the art that I work so hard on. But I'm not here to tell you how to live your life, so you do you. And if you insist on using these methods, then I'll just block you and move on with my life. But at this point will be a showcase where I'll be demonstrating the concepts covered in the video. Be sure to like and subscribe, and let's get into the fights. For these fights, I'll be using a two-handed tree spear on a dex build. I went with the tree spear because I wanted a weapon that has a level 2 stun, so I have an easier time positioning myself to set up backstabs. The hyper armor given by the two-handed tree spear was an added benefit that lets me compete with opposing hyper armor setups and prevent them from overwhelming me. After getting my opponent to wake up a bit, I bait them in toward me and drop behind them with a backstep and grab them out of their roll with a backstab. From here, I don't really know what their plan was, but I wasn't going to stick around and find out, so I hit them with a lightning bolt and finished the fight. But up next, we have a halberd enjoyer, running it two-handed, presumably for the access to hyper armor. He starts off with a running attack, which we punish, and he continues to press, and we get him with a jump. I want him to stay aggressive, so I back off to draw him in, and he does so willingly. We roll the hit, and take a trade on the rolling attack, but from this we learn that he likes to chain the R1s. These are super easy to strafe, so we can strafe the standing attacks pretty comfortably here, and go for a grab, but he manages to roll out. He starts panic rolling forward, so I go for a grab, but I get an input drop on the grab. Go for a roll catch instead, and strafe expecting him to mash out a hit stun, and grab the backstab to finish the fight. Greatsword users have a nasty habit of mashing out a hit stun repeatedly, which is something that you can easily take advantage of. With that in mind, we start off the fight with a quick punish as he tries to run in, and grab the roll catch, and now that he's close, strafe to grab the backstab and finish the fight. For the next fight, we see a Mesmer cosplay with a Guardian Sword Spear. I double back on their jump attack with one of my own, and delay it to roll catch. Then go for another jump attack, expecting him to mash out a hit stun, which they do, except it's an R2, so I get stunned instead, which tells me that they're willing to risk a trade. They backstep from neutral, and I strafe the attack, but I'm a little late for the grab. They throw out a running attack, and I delay to bait out the R1, and strafe to get the backstab and finish the fight. Pressure is a really good tool to bait your opponent into doing what you want. If they're scared, then they'll panic roll, but if they're not, they'll just swing at you. You don't want them feeling comfortable with walking into your space for free, and you don't want them feeling like running away from you is safe either. So after landing a few hits as they try and escape, I let go of the pressure and they immediately start panic rolling forward, so I double back to grab the roll catch and finish the fight. The next fight starts off as my opponent closes in with Halberd off Kiba. And they start off the fight landing a few hits on me as I try and get a read of the latency and how I'm going to adjust my spacing. I get an unintentional grab here, but quickly reset and bait a roll in, but I miss the grab angle and it gives me a normal R1. I take advantage of it, vortex with a couple mix-ups, and let off the pressure before pushing back in, race to bait the roll, and grab the backstab. The next fight starts off as my opponent jumps in, and I get a little fancy, go for a backstep attack, and grab the roll catch. Peel and jump back in for another, and back off in case of the mash. They go for an L2, which I roll, and reverse backstep for the backstab. In general, Colossal Swords are pretty easy to backstab. If you roll their hit and you're in good position, then any attempt to follow up will result in them getting backstabbed. So with that in mind, I roll their hit, unlock, and angle myself for the grab. After they wake up, they go for another running attack, which we roll, and delay to pressure the roll, and grab the roll catch to finish the fight. The next fight starts off against a pretty aggressive katana user. I start off outspacing their jump, and punish the whiff, peel, and grab a roll catch. Then back off to see how they respond. They whiff a running attack, and I roll catch on their panic roll. So they back off and swap over to CGS, finding that the katana just isn't working out for them. They whiff another attack, and I go for a grab, but I'm a little too slow. But after we reset, they go for another running attack, whiff, and give me another roll, and this time we're able to grab the back. I try for a wake up, but I'm not able to land it. And I end up whiffing another grab. This time they're too far away from the grab box. Generally, there comes a point where I've whiffed enough backstabs that honestly, it starts getting a little embarrassing. So at this point, I decided to just end the fight and hit them with the JR1. The next fight starts out as I'm paying no attention to my opponent, and I eat a nice JR2 as they punish my buff. As far as I'm concerned, the second that you spawn in, the fight has started, so I really have no room to complain. It's a really solid move. He then goes for the fully charged R2, which we punish with a jump, and then strafe the roll poke for the backstab. After he wakes up, he goes for 2 swings, and we get a pivot to grab the backstab and finish the fight. Hey! My next opponent goes to mirror me with another tree spear, and in this clip, I'm really trying to get a backwards roll catch, but it's super fucking hard to land, and I end up messing up the input on the block cancel and get a running attack instead. It was a perfect setup too, so I'm really disappointed that I missed it. We reset and go back into the fight, bait a couple hits, and reset a bit of ground to try and draw them in either with a running or standing attack. They opt for the running attack, and we strafe for the backstab. For this fight, we have a halberd user with Phantom Slash. I get inside and fail the strafe, eating a hit from them. They mash out a hit stun and follow up with the L2, which I'm able to strafe this time and punish with the backstab. I hit them with a wake up, roll their hit, and punish it with a roll backstab to finish the fight. And for the last fight we have Power Stance Curve Swords. They start off pretty aggressive with the running L1, I roll their hit and end up catching them with a crouch attack, land a reverse jump, and back off to bait them in. They oblige, and we go for a grab but a little too late. Reset, bait another, and then grab the roll catch to finish the fight. But that's going to do it for this video. I'm currently researching some interesting things with backstabs, including a bug that might have caught your eye a few times in this video, so be sure to sub to the channel, leave a like, and I'll catch you in the next one.